So I spent about 40 hours playing Honkai Star Rail, and here are my thoughts so far. And you're probably wondering the first thing that comes to your mind. Is it worth checking it out if you're a Genshin player, or does it have a better endgame than Genshin? Honestly, if you're going to be playing Honkai Star Rail alongside Genshin, and assuming you're only playing it casually, which means not logging in every day, and you're not trying to min-max everything, then yeah, Honkai Star Rail is a pretty good game to play alongside Genshin. Like, to me, the biggest draw to this game would be the immersion, the storytelling, and the characters. Now, as for the endgame, I already experienced the game's daily loop. I also believe I completed most of the weekly activities, and from what I can tell, Honkai Star Rail is probably going to be following the same pattern as Genshin, which means releasing a lot of different events that you can participate in as one of the endgame activities you can do. But ultimately, I think Honkai Star Rail will end up eating more of your time than Genshin if you're going to be playing it daily. However, there is a twist how you can play this game on autopilot, and maybe once I get to the real endgame, which is like maxing out your characters, and everyone becomes super powerful over time, then the time to farm up the materials daily will probably be reduced as well. But I'll explain all of this later in the video. For now, let me just show you some great and not so great things about the game as well. Also, just to be clear with you, this is the final closed beta footage I'll be showing. The game is coming out very soon, so I don't think major revisions will be made to the game, but keep in mind what I'm talking about here might not be the final product. Also, I won't be spoiling the story here, but all I can say right now is that it's really good. So, Honkai Star Rail's combat is turn-based. You can explore the levels by moving around with the character, and you will see enemies roaming in the area, and the way the combat starts is either the enemy ambushes you, which will rarely happen unless you're doing something wrong, or you will just attack the enemy by yourself. Now, the combat is really simple. Each character has a basic attack and a skill. You can always use a basic attack, but to use a skill you need to spend 1 point, you can see here, and you will obtain these points by using the basic attack. Everyone shares these points, it's not character specific, so basically you need to find a good balance between using basic attacks and skills, because some skills like March 7th are really important when you need to apply a shield to your ally. Now, each character also has a passive talent, which can be as simple as boosting a character's attack, or the character could also have a unique mechanic. Like, for example, they do follow-up attacks after a certain trigger. But the coolest thing each character has is a burst. Just like in Genshin, you first need to gather the energy, but what's really unique about using the burst is that once it's available, you can use it anytime you want. Like, for example, there's gonna be a bunch of enemies activating in a sequence right now, and I could just activate this burst, and it will be inserted in the middle of the chain. So there's a lot of cool planning you can do with this. Now, the game does have an elemental system, but you won't be creating any reactions. Instead, each enemy has a toughness, which is this white bar, and the only way to reduce it is by using the character's matching element symbol you can see above the bar. For example, you can reduce this enemy's toughness by using physical or lightning attacks. Now, why would you want to reduce the enemy's toughness? Well, when the bar is completely depleted, the character who reduces it to 0 will inflict a toughness break, and 2 things will happen. First of all, a huge amount of damage will be dealt when the toughness is broken, and then, depending on which element inflicted the toughness break, there will be a status effect applied to the enemy. For example, physical attack break will inflict bleed, ice attack break will inflict frozen state, and so on. The game places a huge emphasis on breaking the enemy's toughness, so eventually you will want to build a character from each element, but so far I found that most of the enemies have 2 or 3 elements they're susceptible to, and I've been able to breeze through the game by using just 3 elements. Also, you can actually use the character's attack to reduce the enemy's toughness when initiating the fight, provided the character's element matches the enemy's weakness. Oh, and one cool thing about each character is that they have these things called techniques. Basically, it's an ability that you can use before starting the fights. For example, the main character can heal the party, some characters can boost the party's attack, others have special ways to initiate the fight and apply more damage or more status effects, so it's a pretty useful system when you want to get a little edge in your fights. But that's basically combat in a nutshell. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the turn-based combat. Coming from Genshin into Honkai Star Rail, I'm not gonna lie, the game feels really slow, especially when I'm trying to farm up some materials, because believe me, there's gonna be lots of things you'll need to acquire just to level up your characters. Now on the bright side, you can enable a speed up animations, so everything in the game starts happening really fast, as you probably already saw from the footage I've been showing. And also, you can enable auto combat, so the game actually plays for you and does all the moves. Now, harder encounters like elite fights or boss fights, this option to use auto battle will be disabled, but when I need to just farm some materials for my characters, it's actually really useful to have it so I can focus on more important priorities in my life. But I know, auto combat isn't for everyone. Like, if the game already plays for you, then what's the point playing it, right? I mean, auto combat in gacha games isn't anything new. As much as we like to make fun of Raid Shadow Legends, it also has auto combat. To me, this is a necessary evil to have, because the daily gameplay loop in Honkai Star Rail is actually kinda long. long. Actually, I think it's now the time we talk about the daily, weekly, and endgame loop. Okay, so first of all, this game also has a resin system. Here it's called Trailblaze Power, and you get a little bit more of it, which is 180 instead of 160 in Genshin, and you can spend it in 5 different ways. The first 2 ways are basically the same as Genshin's ley lines, but in addition to farming money and character experience books, you can also obtain experience for weapons, which are called light cones in this game, and you can also farm for character talent materials. Each single run costs 10 points, but in a single fight you can have 6 runs, so I can pay 60 resin and then just put the game on auto combat and wait until it finishes. Then there's Caverns of Corrosion, where you can farm relics, and relics in this game are the equivalent to artifacts in Genshin. Then there's Echoes of War. This is the equivalent of weekly boss fights, and one cool thing I like about it is that you can only do it only 3 times, but you can actually decide to do the same boss all 3 times, which means you can get multiple of the same drops for that week. Finally, the last way how we can spend the Trailblaze Power, or resin, is by doing the Simulated Universe. Now, this is like a special roguelike mode, and it's actually going to be one of the main weekly activities you'll be doing, because there is a weekly cap of points you can acquire, and maxing out the weekly points is going to be important because the last reward is actually called Tracks of Destiny, which is an advanced material required to level up your character talents. Now, you actually don't spend points to enter the Simulated Universe. Instead, whenever you finish a fight with an elite enemy, you'll be able to open this treasure, and it requires you to spend Trailblaze Power. Now, what you're getting from this treasure is called planar ornaments. These items are like accessories, but it's more like a separate 2-set artifact. So yeah, in addition to having regular 4-set artifacts, you will also need to complete this weekly activity, spend your resin, and obtain 2-set artifact accessory pieces, I guess you would call it. I'm not a huge fan of this, because this just introduces more randomization into my life. Like in Genshin, it's already painful enough when I spend resin and I get really terrible artifacts. Now in Honkai Star Rail, I need to worry about a separate 2-set artifact system. I mean, I don't know. On the flip side, I see that it drops a lot of these artifacts when I use the resin, but you have to enter the Simulated Universe, fight through a couple of floors until you encounter the elite enemy, defeat it, and then finally claim the treasure chest. Like, I've been optimizing this party of 4 characters for the past 40 hours, and it still takes me quite a while to just get through the floors. Maybe when we get to the max level and all the characters are fine-tuned, it will take less time to clear the Simulated Universe, but for now, it just takes a bit too long for me. Still, this is just a weekly activity. You don't have to do this each day, but you will need to work towards it over the week. Finally, for the endgame, as I said before, it looks like Honkai Star Rail, just like any other gacha game, will have a lot of events, but in addition, there's also the Forgotten Hole, which is the equivalent to the Abyss in Genshin. Now, I would say that Simulated Universe also qualifies as an endgame activity, because so far I am at World 3, and there are a total of 6 worlds, and I'm not sure if it gets more difficult or additional content gets unlocked when you reach World 6, so I'll have to see for myself once I reach the max level. But as you can see, the progression system is almost identical to Genshin's. You've got ley lines, artifact domains, weekly boss fights, and as I'm editing this video, I think there's also something called Stagnant Shadow, where you also farm for the character ascension materials. So that's another way how you need to spend your Trailblaze Power. But just as I mentioned in the beginning, right now, Honkai Star Rail's daily gameplay loop feels longer than Genshin's. Like when I log into Genshin, I just do the commissions, and then blow my resin on either domains or some materials I need to acquire for that day. Here, in Honkai Star Rail, first of all, you need to spend all the resin, then you need to work towards the Simulated Universe weekly points, which I guess you could do it in one sitting once per week, but it does take a while. And then there's also some kind of a daily mission. I think I only been getting one, so that's a plus. But there's also this thing called daily training, which I mean, yeah, it doesn't take long. It randomizes like 5 different daily missions for you for that day. Most of these missions can be completed as you're just progressing through your daily loop, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. Now, I haven't really talked about it, but there's also the gacha system here. I cannot fully confirm it, but the rates seem to be almost identical to Genshin's when it comes to the character gacha, while for the light cones, which are the equivalent to weapons, it does seem to have a bit of a different appearance rate, since this light cone right here is the only one featured on the banner. Now, the animation gacha looks really cool, and the first 5-star I unlocked was Bronya, and it looked amazing, but I mean, it's a gacha game, right? So if you enjoy these kinds of systems, then yeah, you'll get a lot of dopamine rush here. Actually, now that I'm editing the video, I discovered 2 major things. First of all, you could actually claim 5-star light cones from the shop, which would be the equivalent of having a 5-star weapon shop in Genshin. You will need to spend Undying Starlight, which is the currency you obtain from using summons. So in a way, if you do a lot of summons and you don't get any 5-star light cone, you can use this currency and claim one of them. Now, the second big thing is that there's an actual 5-star character selector. From what I understand, this can only be done once on your account, and you will need to do 300 standard banner wishes, and afterwards, you'll be able to select one of the 5-star characters you see here. player. Honestly, 300 summons is a bit too much, but eventually you will be able to select 5-star character for free. So in a way, I guess Hoiverse finally caved in and gave us a 5-star selector, just not in Genshin Impact. Overall, after spending 40 hours playing this game almost non-stop, my thought so far is that I really like Honkai Star Rail, but I still think the game could be much better with some improvements. Like, Hoiverse are insanely good at creating immersion for their games. When I was playing this game, every single soundtrack was amazing. Even though this is not an open world game, the map design and the secrets and the many enemies I encountered were interesting. There's lots of different interactions you can have in the game. Like, for example, there's this whole hidden quest line, you could call it, where you're just interacting with trash cans, but they have so much charm and quirky dialogue in them. And most of the side quests were also really interesting. Like, when I'm playing this game, I can feel part of the world. And that's, in my opinion, one of the best feelings to have when you're playing something. It just feels kind of a shame that this game is turn-based, because when I'm playing it and exploring all the stuff, it feels like a fully fledged JRPG. And most of the JRPG developers have moved away from turn-based combat. Like, they already have perfected the action RPG elements of Honkai and Genshin. Maybe they could have come up with some kind of real-time strategy combat. I don't know. But for now, the saving grace is the burst system, where you can use the burst anytime you want, so the turn-based combat feels more flexible. But on the other hand, the toughness system doesn't really blow my mind. It's just not super intriguing to me. And I also feel like it kind of limits team building options as well. Probably too soon to talk about this, because I didn't really experience all the characters and team synergies. But to me, the turn-based combat is the least interesting thing about this game. Also, I really don't like the way they develop character talents. Basically, they are called traces in this game. And on the first look, you might think, wow, that's a character talent tree. Well, not really. Most of these small nodes right here, they're just boring stat increases. However, there are some interesting upgrades you can unlock for characters, but it's not something that you choose to unlock. All of this will be unlocked eventually. Think about these new trace passive abilities to unlock for characters to be the same as passive talents you unlock for characters in Genshin. Oh, and if you've been wondering, yeah, each character also has constellations, and in this game, they're called Eidolons. But yeah, if you're a Genshin player, you will notice a lot of similarities Honkai Star Rail has to Genshin. From the menu layouts, to the daily activities, to even some of the character designs. But who knows, Hoiverse games are connected, as they say, so maybe there's a reason why Dan Hong looks like Zhongli. Overall, I really like Honkai Star Rail. It's been a while since I played a really good JRPG like this one, but at the same time, I cannot turn a blind eye to some of the things that I dislike. Still, after experiencing almost all of the game's systems, as someone who plays Genshin daily, I would recommend checking this game out, but if you don't have a lot of time you can spend, then you should play this game casually. Don't worry too much about spending the resin and completing the weekly activities, because the best part about this game is the world, the characters, and the immersion. But for now, I'd really appreciate if you could just press the like button on the video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.